A glance in the mirror. Chapter 48. Puerto de la Cruz. Josephine and Terry began to form firm ideas how they were going to plan the property in Casares, to make full use of every building. The main part, fronting the road, was to be a studio with a large gallery behind, whilst incorporating a garage to the front left-hand side. There was talk of a tea room with gallery, but that never transpired. The builder's job was to retile the main roofs, refashion the front elevation to make it suitably Moorish, and build some linked wooden railings alongside the paths in the garden. He was also to install some double-glazed windows in the sunroom, window shutters for the lounge, and a new hot water system linked to a solar panel on the kitchen roof. The pottery complex was to be converted into a self-contained 3-bedroom holiday let, and a pool was going to be designed and built alongside the wall fronting the road. All this was to be done using the local builder Prudencio Gonzalez, who didn't speak a word of English, nor was fully conversant with the latest methods of damp-proofing and insulation. Months later, it was such a relief when they had all really finished and he could call the place his own and not have their vans and tools taking up the parking area. In August 1988, Josephine was out on one of her fortnightly visits, which coincided with the Marbella money show. Whilst attending the Hill Samuel stand, she met Margaret Stone, editor of the Money Mail. Margaret wrote an article which headlined Josephine as Superwoman and at the cost of money, and this helped promote Josephine's image, allowing her to use the article as a stepping stone when meeting new clients. The following month, the main house roof was finished and the garage well underway, the Moorish designs for the front façade nearing completion, and the window bars for the windows, although made, were not quite all in position. The villagers would begin to take note, and from what Terry heard, were in agreement with the plans, thinking the front elevation design and name change in keeping with the town's historic past. The new name, replacing serendipity, was Puerto de la Cruz, maintaining harmony with the large iron cross on a crag overlooking the town. This symbol was as much a sign of religious purpose as it was a link of the town to monastery, a supreme protector. The title was the original local place name. As the builders altered the house, documents to pass over the estate's ownership had still not been signed, the owners being away in France seeing to their new house. Their solicitors were quite happy with the existing arrangement that Josephine had signed, an agreement to purchase with the Cravens. The Escuitura was being scrutinized to make sure their legal position for an outright sale of ownership was complete. And from a security angle, the sooner Terry occupied the place, the better it would be. Most days he travelled up into the mountains to supervise the work and order what materials were needed. Terry engaged a Spanish gardener with the help of Maria Geronimo, of ancient vintage and even older tools, whose task was to keep the garden and the terraces in good shape, keep watch on the place whilst they were not in residence, and attend the gardens twice a week for 8 hours a day for the princely sum of £30. When eventually they moved in, he agreed to stay on. Anna was keeping up with her schoolwork, but found it extremely difficult maintaining her place in the class. That year she had to attend a summer school to keep her class position. Terry went to see her teacher to put in a good word about her continuing the following year. Walter Vane kindly wrote a letter to her teacher to assure them that Anna would catch up with mathematics. Each student had to come to the front of the class and explain on the board how to solve mathematical problems. The Latin lessons had always been a source of worry to Anna, having to translate the Latin to English and then back into Spanish again. We were not so sure what the future would bring, particularly Anna's, whether she would decide to stay in Spain or return to England to do a hoped-for university course. The fact that she didn't socialise outside school, except for the dancing class, was another concern, especially when it came to having confidence to cope with social events and boyfriends. If this came about, both would help integrate her into the community. The house in Sotogrande was viewed by an English couple with 2 children that October. They were delighted by it, deciding immediately to place a deposit with Trevor Dine, stating they would like to complete on the 14th of December 1988. How lucky Terry and Josephine were, for almost at the same time Josephine had an offer for Hermitage Cottage, lodged for completion that November. This was a stroke of good fortune, for it meant that she could look for a property in Aylesbury, closer to the train station, a move that would be far more convenient for Helen. On Josephine's next return to England, she had to find a place to buy, to tie in with the sale of the Hermitage. Monk's Cottage was a listed terraced house opposite St Mary's Church, Aylesbury. It had just been put on the market, and although very narrow, 1 room wide, offered 2 double bedrooms on 2 floors, the top one in the attic. The cottage overlooked St Mary's Church graveyard. The road to its front was a cul-de-sac, so there was no passing traffic, which made it a perfect location, close to the shops, railway and bus stations. That year's convention in December was to be held in Hong Kong, a place Josephine had always wanted to visit. There was to be a trip into China to see the Clay Army and visit to the Summer Palace. They stayed at the Mandarin Hotel, a tall skyscraper right in the heart of the city, close to the old street market, and whilst they were there, they bought some watercolours. These augmented Terry's own efforts, so that the gallery could be fully stocked on their return, in preparation for when it officially opened that spring. It was all very exciting, being in an atmosphere of oriental bustle, the tall modern buildings and pulsating atmosphere, the jewel-like shoreline at night, and the back street markets and stalls, selling everything from birds packed together in cages that made vast blocks of twittering, twilling, chattering bird calls. On another stall was delicate ceramics and brightly dyed materials. Old women were playing mahjong at every corner, yelling traders were selling their wares, and the incessant traffic noise was forever ringing in your ears. Now that Terry was going to have a gallery to exhibit his pictures, he started painting with more vigour, being goaded on by having to fill wall space. All his days, when not doing the normal rounds, were spent turning out paintings. It was a very productive time and thoroughly enjoyable. Terry had just finished 2 watercolours ready to be hung in the gallery, premature, because the builders hadn't finished the frontage. They had been constructing a new roof at the back, over the sitting room, replacing the original reed-on poles for concrete beams and laths. The chimney stack leaked in the winter rain, so that too had to be rebuilt. On a daily basis, Terry drove up to Casares to check up on the progress of the building work, and by November the purchasers had still not signed the contract for sale for the property in Sotogrande, but had enrolled their 2 children to attend the international school in Sotogrande after Christmas, where all lessons were in English. The deadline for moving to Casares was just before this couple's removal vans were to arrive. The builders promised to have the main house in Casares completed, and this included the roofs, chimney, gallery and floors. With that in mind, Terry organised a removal firm to load up and move them on Monday the 12th of December, to be ready for Christmas. The property, we thought, would be watertight and dust-free. Terry now started designing the business cards, letter headings and signboards to advertise the gallery. The builders had been there for 7 months, making enormous changes, particularly to the front of the house, linking in the new garage. The whole frontage resembled an ancient Moorish villa, with old-fashioned onion-shaped roof lines, and over the bay windows traditional wrought iron grills, and the centrepiece on the roof parapet to an imposing bell tower with distinctive ceramic ornamentations on the corners. And to make it simpler to park the car on the narrow road, a useful hard shoulder in local stone was laid. The pottery has now been turned into a 3-bedroom cottage, and the doors, windows, wardrobes and cupboards were being made to match. In the Casares joinery room, in local wood. Terry had marked all the builder's instructions on the wall in black ink so that there would be no mistake, and it worked. All major house internal works were promised to be ready for Christmas. The next task was the small cottage at the end of the garden. Terry and Josephine could move in, knowing that there would be no more dust and plaster walked through the living area. The garden pillars and linking wooden beams were gradually built, which made a great difference to the overall appearance of the garden, making it more substantial, joined up and secure. When they arrived back home from Hong Kong, it was all hands to the pump to start packing up, making preparations to move everything to Casares on the 12th of December. They had 1 week to do it. Being a national bank holiday, Anna had a couple of days off from school. She was now busily filling in the picture holes with polyfiller, then packing her things in boxes, sorting out her clothes and arranging her school books. It had been arranged that Anna and Terry would be sleeping in a house in the village whilst all the packing and transporting was going on. Arrangements had been made to eat their evening meals in the village restaurant, which made such a nice change from cooking, and exciting to sample for Spanish customs close to. The removal van arrived that Friday, and the men started packing the prepared boxes to ferry all their things to Casares by the following Monday.